Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. He's been at it again, our Teflon friend Gary Lineker. Only the Teflon appears to be rubbing off. Not content with preaching to us on a soapbox in a stadium built by slaves at the Qatar World Cup whilst pocketing the cash, or being bothered to take heed of the warnings that his interventions into politics are breaching the BBC guidelines. Remember the dig about Russian oligarchs? On Tuesday, in his latest gaffe, Gary tweeted that the government's plan to effectively ban anyone who arrives in the UK illegally from claiming asylum had been expressed in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s. You know, when someone's losing the argument, when they start making reference to Nazi Germany, I hear his supporters saying he didn't actually use the word Nazi. Yeah, that's a bit like Meghan and Harry claiming that they did not actually say the word racism, but we knew what they meant. And worse still, after making his comments and having a chat with his BBC bosses, Gary was defiant. He showed no remorse whatsoever.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary?
Do you fear getting suspended?
No, I'm only mate. What are you doing? Yes. Anything about the tweet, Gary? Sorry, what do you regret sending the tweet at all? No.
Do you stand by what you said?
Sorry?
Do you stand by what you said in your tweet?
Of course.
Pretty arrogant, right? And Gary's overpaid a long-in-the-tooth, spoilt brat match-of-the-day pundits, the likes of Ian Wright and Alan Shearer, who clearly haven't a clue of how highly sought after their jobs are, or that people don't watch for them, are coming out in support of Gary by refusing to present the show. Pathetic. Talk about ego. Ian tweeted, "Everybody knows what match of the day means to me, but I've told the BBC I won't be doing it tomorrow. Solidarity." Cast your mind back, Ian. Does Matt Le Tissier ring a bell? Solidarity? Right, seriously. And if there was no football and just their boring rhetoric, people would simply switch off. They're not that good. And now a load of others are pitching their support. The BBC has had to cancel Football Focus because Alex Scott and Jason Mohammed, who have joined in solidarity with Gary. For goodness sake, people, read the room. Some of my very good BBC mates are currently desperately trying to keep hold of their jobs because of the local radio cull. And these spoilt brat presenters, "I'm joining in with Gary." It's ridiculous. To be clear, these people are supporting Gary Lineker's deeply offensive complaints and comparison, with Nazi Germany. Good on the BBC for finally showing some backbone, albeit a bit late. Last night, Tim Davie, the DG, said this.
Gary Lineker breached the guidelines. Why didn't you sack him?
Well, I think we always look to take proportionate action, and that's what we've done.
But haven't you just kicked it further down the line? Aren't you delaying the
Well,
inevitable?
I don't want to add to the statement. I think we've had very constructive discussions. The statement's very clear, and that's where we are. As editor-in-chief of the BBC, I think one of our founding principles is impartiality, and that's what we're delivering on.
Now, this is not about freedom of speech. I'm all for that freedom. But this is not about that. This is about working for a state-owned broadcaster paid for by you and I. If you don't pay the licence fee, you could end up in jail. A broadcaster whose existence relies on being apolitical and impartial. That is the only way that it can survive. BBC employees and freelancers, especially in prominent positions, have signed up to their charter and must follow the rules, especially those in news and their highest paid on-screen stars. If Gary doesn't like this, Gary could exercise his freedom to leave his £1.35 million job, and he can continue to be vocal and take his talents elsewhere. That's what I did, only I wasn't paid that much. Come to think of it, nobody there is. Perhaps all these spoilt brat presenters joining him might want to consider whether they would do this in a private company, like, say, ITV. Yeah, I thought not. They know that they'd be fired in a heartbeat. A load of woke celebrities have jumped onto the bandwagon to castigate the government. Pointless Richard Osman tweeted, "Pathetic," in response to the BBC's tweet that Gary would be stepping down. Gary Neville tweeted, "When you take on the Tories and the system, awful people who we need gone, offer a..." and then there's an emoji of wine. Sounds like he's already been on it. Carol Vorderman chucked in her 2 pennies worth, saying how wonderful it was to see all the love and support for Gary. Well, that's not what I'm hearing. I, personally, have experienced the backlash of Gary's comments after he decided to take aim at me when I showed my support for Priti Patel's turn-back policy. It was not the fact that he commented that was unacceptable. It was the fact that he works for the BBC and commented. Nobody's bigger than the channel, Gary, and all the presenters joining you might want to consider that. It's time to clear the BBC Sport pitch. It's time to show Lineker the red card. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? The BBC's Match of the Day presenter Gary Lineker has been suspended from hosting the show, and this comes after he criticised the government's new illegal migration bill earlier in the week, comparing the language used in the launch of the policy similar to that of 1930s Germany. Tory MPs have written to the BBC demanding an independent investigation as they think that Lineker should offer a full apology. However, his suspension has split the public. A Daily Mirror petition calling on the BBC to reinstate the presenter has already reached 150,000 signatures, with various presenters across the broadcaster pulling out of presenting football shows this afternoon in protest over his suspension. So what do you think? Should the BBC have suspended him in the first place? Then at 4:50, it's Royal Roundup time, and royal biographer Angela Levin will be in the studio to give all the latest from behind palace walls. King Charles granted Prince Edward the title Duke of Edinburgh on the Prince's 59th birthday, and Harry and Meghan have said that given their titles, it's their children's birthright to be called Prince and Princess. I'll bring you the latest. Then at 5, it's this week's difficult conversation. Domestic abuse survivor Andrea Aviet and director Lindsay Attenborough will be joining me in the studio. Their award-winning short film was screened in Parliament this week and provided a strong voice for survivors of domestic abuse. I'll be speaking to them all about their work. And then later, stay tuned. Matt Letitia, football pundit, will be giving me his thoughts on Gary Lineker's suspension. You won't want to miss that. That's on the way in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also broadcaster and political commentator Sam Dowler. Where are they? What's with the single shots? They've got a bit lazy here. Very lazy on the cameras. Right, I'm going to start with you, Lizzie, because you're footballing ex-wag.
I am. Former wag. What a title.
What did you think then, Gary Lineker?
Well, I think it was the right thing for the BBC to do, but they should have acted before now. I mean, this isn't the first time Gary has been putting his political views on us, and we don't really want to hear them. I don't, want to hear from the Home Secretary on the offside rule, do we? I don't want to hear his political views. And the fact is he's done this time and time before. We heard him all moaning about Brexit and what have you. We don't want to know that. You're there and being paid by our money, the taxpayers' money, to talk about football. That's what you do. And he's a great football pundit. One of our, was a great football player.
I can't watch him.
80 England caps.
Can't watch him.
And he was the one player that never ever got booked, the Golden Boy. But the BBC didn't then expect him when they took him on as their main flagship host of Match of the Day to continuously get into this political tweeting. So, and he's done it so much, and that's not what we're paying for. It's our money, 1.36 million.
Yeah, 1.36.
He is paid.
For
That's
that?
a huge amount of money.
Well, I don't understand why he's paid so much. Sam Dowler. And how was your holiday? Was it good?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you very much. Beautiful Sydney. It's an amazing place. I suggest anyone if they can get over there.
They can afford it.
They should. And it's a very long flight. I'm still a bit like
How's the jet lag?
Yeah, it's not great.
So you've come to the storm that Gary Lineker...
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really care about Gary Lineker here or there. I mean, I find his Walker's adverts quite annoying. But, however, I do agree with the sentiment of his tweet. But it isn't really about whether you agree with the sentiment.
No, it's not,
It's about whether he should be allowed to do it or not. And he's created a furore at the BBC. I mean, obviously, all these other presenters have basically decimated, today's sports schedule. And, again, I don't really care because I don't watch it. But a lot of people do watch it, and a lot of people will be upset about that. And, he's kind of turned his position and football and the shows into a political beast when it really shouldn't be. So
I also think that actually what he's done is quite intimidatory, because what's happened is quite intimidatory. Because imagine you're working for BBC Sport, you actually maybe don't like Gary Lineker, might not get on with him, or would rather carry on working.
Yeah.
But you are now going to be a scab if you dare say
that's the
that
thing,
you
yeah.
don't want to do that.
No one will want to be in that seat.
No.
Though that's what every ex-footballer I know would love that job.
Of course,
Believe you
but
and me.
they would be going against Gary and then against what he said
You'd be
as
like
well.
the scab,
Yeah,
you would be.
yeah.
And the PFA have come out saying that, basically none of the managers after the matches can talk to the BBC. PFA, which is like the unions for the footballers.
It's such a huge mess.
It is a huge mess.
Yeah.
But it's something quite close to Gary's heart. I mean, he has hosted 2 refugees in his home.
So-
For two
Yeah.
weeks,
Well,
and in another one of his
I
homes,
get it.
not in his actual home.
I get it, but
and
obviously-
he has no idea what it's like living. He's in his multi-million-pound house in Leafy Barnes. What it's next to be a hotel that is full and crowded with migrants.
Agreed.
How does Gary know?
But he doesn't like the language of the bill. He doesn't like Suella Braverman's language, and nor do I. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think that's saying about the 100 million people coming
so
over.
What?
Yeah,
I don't like.
But so
I agree.
what?
It's a
I don't like
it's a
Gary's
moot
language.
point.
So
It's
what?
a moot point.
Why are we
because it's about the
listening?
BBC.
Why are we listening to Gary Lineker? Why is Gary Lineker relevant to this political conversation? Gary Lineker works for the BBC. I worked for the BBC. I know full well, even though I wasn't newsy, although there was one element where I did do a lot of news, but then I was more radio, so we radio presenters had a slightly looser dispensation. I was also, just like him, a freelancer, and I said something and I was in trouble. And not only that, I lost 2 shows. And what I said, I was on another media somewhere else, because obviously my single job wasn't enough to pay for me to carry on working for the BBC. I couldn't just work for them alone. So I'm not happy to see him getting away with that, and I was actually quite annoyed that it's taken them this long to actually get him.
I don't think he really cares by the looks of things. Like,
No, he doesn't.
I think he's put it on.
Well, he didn't care when he was getting millions going to Qatar. He didn't worry about the human rights
This is the
there,
hill
did
that
he?
he's chosen to die on, and if it means they let him go from the BBC, he will find it incredibly easy to go to Sky or to go to ITV. They will pay him a fortune. So it's not.
I don't know about that. I think he's going to probably do podcasts and things. I don't think he'll go to another
Please
channel.
no.
But that's the
Well,
thing,
that's
though.
what he's
If
doing,
he
he's
was
doing
with
very
any
well.
of the other networks and channels, he could sing from the rooftops.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
He works for the BBC. That's in his contract.
Yeah.
We are paying his wages. OK? But
I think it might be the end of the line at the BBC for Gary, because this has obviously caused them a huge problem, and it's caused their scheduling a whole massive problem, which will lose them viewers as well. So they won't like this.
I'd like to see those who went out and support as well also gone, because I think there's a big void of new talent within the BBC, and it's about time they started filling it in and getting rid of the old stock. So if they're going to go of their own accord, because the BBC are getting quite good at getting rid of the older people, if they want to go, let them go.
He's still got his crisp adverts, and they're calling them Wokey Bacon.
Very good. Right, so what are your thoughts on it? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. In the next hour, Matt Letitia will give us his views on the Gary Lineker saga. But after the break, it's our great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? Match of the Day presenter Gary has been suspended following his criticism of the government's new illegal migration bill, describing the language used in the launch of the policy similar to that of 30s Germany. Earlier in the week... I'll just finish now, shall I? Earlier in the week, Gary stood by his views and said that he did not fear suspension from the BBC. But yesterday afternoon, the broadcaster pulled him from presenting Match of the Day until he and the BBC have agreed a clear position of his use on social media. Now, members of the BBC sports staff have got behind him and they've had to suspend certain football programming. So was it the right decision to suspend him? He still hasn't apologised. Your thoughts? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet me at GBNews. I've got a poll up right now asking that very question. Should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? Cast your vote now. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for our Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? The BBC's Match of the Day presenter, Mr Lineker, was suspended yesterday now following his tweets. I don't know if you didn't know about it, where have you been? It's when he compared the government's latest migration policy to Surtees' Germany. In the tweet, he said, there is no huge influx. We take far fewer refugees than other major European countries. This is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s. And I'm out of order? I'd say you are, Gary. Now, a series of Tories MPs have written to the BBC demanding that an independent investigation be launched, as they don't think that the suspension is enough. However, his suspension has split the public. Daily Mirror's petition calling on the BBC to reinstate the presenter has already reached 150,000 signatures, with various other presenters across the BBC pulling out of presenting football shows this afternoon. Well, he's got a lot more money than you, so good luck with that. That's all in protest of his suspension. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? First, let's head over to GB News' reporter Jack Carson, who's live from the BBC HQ. Jack, there are many developments. What's the latest? Give us a brief update.
Well, what we've had is actually a bit of a resumption of sports coverage on the BBC. BBC 5 Live have started their live match commentary of the Leeds United and Brighton game. But commentator Ian Dennis has said that it's been a tough day. He said it's also a very difficult time for BBC Sport. Personally, today I found it very difficult, but I'm a BBC staff member. I'm a radio commentator for BBC 5 Live. And today, like every Saturday afternoon, we provide a service to you, the audience. But we've also seen a leaked email inside BBC Sport from the director of BBC Sport, Barbara Slater, which saying to BBC staff that they understand how unsettling this is for all of you, and we understand the strength of feeling which has been generated by this issue. The BBC itself has apologised for the lack of sports programming today. Of course, we know when this row kicked off late yesterday afternoon. when pundits started boycotting and saying they wouldn't appear on programmes, the BBC has had to cancel Final Score today, Football Focus, after presenters and pundits said they wouldn't appear. And as you mentioned, what we've seen from politicians, we've had Keir Starmer say this has gone very badly for the BBC, and those backbench group of MPs, part of the Common Sense group led by Sir John Hayes, calling on Gary Lineker for a full apology. And so there is a start of resumption of sports coverage on the BBC, but the big question, of course, is what match of the day tonight is going to look like, because we've had the commentators say they're not going to commentate on any of the games. So there's going to be no presenting, no punditry analysis, no commentators. So what match of the day looks like tonight is going to be a big question for the BBC.
Thank you very much, Jack, who needs to watch that there. You can just watch our coverage here on GB News. Patrick Christie's will be giving you a wonderful special edition of a kind of match of the day here. Now, it was interesting what he said there. One of the things I did take from that was the mention of a service. Yes, it is a service. That's right. It's not about ego. Right, joining me now is the campaign director of Defund the BBC, Rebecca Ryan, former Ofcom chief media advisor Martin Campbell, BBC 100 fellow and author Marcus Collins, political commentator and former Lib Dem spin doctor Joe Phillips. Right, so in an interestingly written list there, I have to talk to these people about listen to me. Honestly, listen, some heads are going to start rolling later on. I'm going to start with you, Rebecca Ryan. You're Defund the BBC. Talk to me, Rebecca. Your thoughts on this. Was the BBC right to suspend Gary?
Absolutely, it was right to suspend Gary. The BBC is obliged under the terms of its charter to be impartial and to unify the country. That's what it is actually legally obliged to do in order that it can tax the British people for watching any live broadcast TV. This is a fundamental tenet of how the BBC is funded. Now, it's really disturbing that Gary Lineker and all of his extremely privileged colleagues there do not understand the basic tenet on which the BBC funding is built. And if they want to carry on and have free speech, and I'm a great supporter of free speech, absolutely should be able to do that on a commercial broadcaster. But, you know, he can't do that whilst the BBC is funded by the licence fee.
Right, thank you for that. Well, I stand with you on that one. Let's go to former Ofcom chief media advisor Martin Campbell. Martin, what do you think about that? Were they right?
Yeah, absolutely they were right. But the problem is they should have done it a long time ago. They should have put their foot on this many weeks ago when they realised that he was breaking their impartiality rules, because the impartiality rules do talk specifically about high-profile BBC people. Well, there's none higher profile than Gary Lineker. And so there's absolutely no point, no reason why they shouldn't have acted before. Now they've acted, and of course you've got this strange solidarity thing going on. Well, what's it solidarity with? The idea that anyone working from the BBC can say whatever they want, or is it solidarity with his views that he expressed? I mean, it's a real mess, but it's of the BBC's own making, and it just shows what their internal compliance procedure is like.
It's a bit ad hoc, isn't it? Marcus Collins, political commentator and former Lib Dem spin. Marcus Collins, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree that it's a big mess. I think we can all see that. But I think that although we don't and shouldn't expect Gary Lineker to be impartial, I think the BBC's impartiality in suspending him is called into question, especially given what they have done yesterday also with the programme produced by David Attenborough. I think that the BBC is pandering to the current government, and that is the contravention of impartiality that we should be talking about.
But why would you say they're pandering to the government? He's made a political comment. He's not meant to be making political comment. How is that pandering to the government?
Well, Tim Davie came in as Director General saying that he wanted to institute guidelines for impartiality. I think the implication of that was really trying to buy off the government, which was threatening the BBC's existence. And I don't think that a sports commentator, his political views are neither here nor there. He's perfectly able to express them as a private citizen, which is what he's done. He's not talking about this on Match of the Day, and you would expect him to.
That doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference. No, it doesn't make any difference. Can I just tell you that, Marcus?
Free speech, as you have.
It doesn't make any difference whether he was on Match of the Day saying it or somewhere else. It goes across the board. Joe Phillips.
Well, I would split hairs with you, Nana, because actually it doesn't go across the board. News presenters, as you know, are under much stricter rules and regulations about what they might say rather than entertainment or sports presenters. If he'd gone on Match of the Day and said the things he'd said, then I could absolutely understand the BBC doing this. But what you can't have is this pick and mix of what now looks exactly as Marcus just said, whether it's true or not. The perception is now that the BBC has bowed to political pressure. At the same time, Lord Alan Sugar and Baroness Karen Brady, both Tory peers, carry on The Apprentice. Alan Sugar endorsed the Tories in the 2019 election and backed Boris Johnson for the leadership.
Well, you just contradicted yourself.
You
just contradicted yourself there because
the BBC, who's been notably quiet, who is, a Tory donor and facilitated a meeting which led to Boris Johnson getting a loan of £800,000. If you're going to have
Joe, can I just say, you just contradicted yourself, because on one side you said that it's totally different for a sports presenter and a news presenter. Then on the other hand, you brought in Sir Alan Sugar and used it as an example. So I'm confused here. The bottom line is, I know, Joe, have you ever worked for the BBC? Just out of interest.
Yes, I have.
Well, me too. And when I worked for the BBC, even though I wasn't in news, I lost two things because I made a comment on another channel, not even the BBC, because they felt it breached their impartiality guidelines. So I wasn't working for them at the time.
I used to produce political programmes,
and
I was
those are the rules.
censured for something that I did as a freelance for another organisation.
And I was a freelancer.
But, so yes, I know that, but I was working on news and politics programmes. Gary Lineker isn't, nor is Alan Sugar.
No, but I wasn't
either. You can't criticise what the BBC have done. They've handled this so badly because it looks as though they're caving into political pressure, because they haven't censured people like Alan Sugar or Karen Brady. And the question still remains about Richard Sharp, Tory donor, bunged in as a chairman, who's been notably silent.
But a lot of the time they always have political people who are affiliated to the kind of party who's in power with the people who were in power at the time. That's just not even unusual. Rebecca, what do you think? Because people seem to be giving Gary Lineker an excuse.
Absolutely. And I think the thing they're talking about, how all of this politicisation of the BBC, what it comes down to is British people are being bullied on their doorsteps and via coercive letters that are threatening them, coming out like red bills with the threats of being sent to prison to fund this organisation. And it is obliged under its charter to be impartial. That's what it comes down to. All of this tit for tat, whataboutery that's going on here and going on across the country from the left and the right. At the end of the day, it has to be impartial. And if it's not impartial, which we know that it isn't, we need to get rid of the TV licence. At the end of the day, the BBC needs to be commercialised.
Yeah, and Marcus, what would you say to that? The BBC needs to be commercial, get rid of the TV licence? In about 20 seconds.
Well, be careful what you wish for, I think. Obviously, the TV licence is an anachronism, but if you look at what Britain would be like culturally without the BBC, I think it would be a greatly impoverished place. And at a time when Britain is really facing a lot of reputational damage, the BBC is one of the last things standing that people outside of Britain value about Britain.
OK. Right, I hear you, and I've got to give my final 10 seconds then to Martin, because, Martin, you haven't had a chance to say. So we've only got 10 seconds. What are your thoughts?
I mean, the BBC are digging their own grave. I mean, if you straight quote from Tim Davie, if you want to be an opinionated columnist or partisan campaigner on social media, then that's a valid choice, but you should not be working at the BBC. Now,
I think that's a great way to end it. That's a great way to end it. Thank you very much to the director of Defund the BBC, Rebecca Ryan, former Ofcom Chief Media Advisor Martin Campbell, BBC 100 fellow and author Marcus Collins, political commentator and former Lib Dem spin doctor Joe Phillips. Thank you so much for joining me. Right, well, what are your thoughts? Keep them coming. You know the coup. GBNews at gbnews.uk. I'm Nana Akua. If you've just joined in, where have you been? Got loads still to come. On the way, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator and broadcaster Sam Dowler. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The BBC has apologised and says it's working hard to resolve the situation after experiencing a mass boycott by its sports presenters. It comes after the broadcaster forced Gary Lineker to step back from Match of the Day over a tweet that was critical of the government. The show will go ahead this evening, but Alan Shearer and Ian Wright have both backed out. Meanwhile, Football Focus and Final Score were cancelled after Alex Scott and Jason Mohammed said they won't appear on the shows. The Chancellor has told GB News he wants Britain to have the most competitive business tax rates amid calls to scrap a planned hike in corporation tax. Ahead of Wednesday's budget, Jeremy Hunt spoke exclusively about his plans to deliver growth and tackle inflation. He said the increase from 19 to 25% would still leave the UK with a lower corporation tax rate than nearly all major rivals. And a 25-year-old man has been arrested under the Terrorism Act after the new IRA claimed responsibility for the shooting of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell. It follows the search of a property in the Londonderry area. Police say the man will also be questioned over a hoax security alert. Mr. Caldwell remains critically ill in hospital after being shot several times in Omagh. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. If you just joined me, where on earth have you been? It's coming up to 20 minutes to 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it is time for our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker. The BBC's Match of the Day presenter Gary Lineker was suspended. If you don't know about that, where on earth have you been? A lot of people cheering from the hilltops. Some people saying that it's terrible what's happened. Carol Vorderman coming in saying how terrible. As if they think... I don't think that's the general consensus across the country. Anyway, following his tweets, where he compared government's latest migration policy to the 1930s Germany, which is just nonsense. And a series of Tory MPs have written to the BBC demanding that an independent investigation be launched, as they don't think the suspension is enough, and I don't think so either. However, his suspension has split the public, apparently. I don't think so. Most places I've gone, most people can't stand him. The Daily Mirror petition has called for the BBC to reinstate the presenter, and it's already reached 150,000 signatures, with various BBC football presenters pulling out of hosting their football shows this afternoon, although some are now resuming sensible... Well, they've come back to their senses and realised they've got bills to pay, and Gary's on 1.35 million. Yeah. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, as a broadcaster and political commentator Sam Dowler. Sam Dowler.
No, I don't think they should suspend him, but I don't think they should fire him either. I think, look, he's one of the jewels in their crown, especially when it comes to sporting. And, you know, I agree with Marcus Collins, who was on there before. Like, if he had said, "Oh, I just love this new bill," you know, nothing would have happened. Nobody would have said anything. So therefore, the fact that he's gone against the government means that he's created this massive problem. So
I don't know about that, because the BBC are quite woke. So if he'd said that, there'd be a lot of people coming and saying, "How dare he say that?" And they'll do what he did to me. They'll be looking and saying, Gary Lineker said he supports this bill, which would mean that these poor asylum seekers wouldn't be able to claim asylum. You know that.
But also he's, I guess he's forcing people like his fans, for example, to look at the bill and look at why he's upset about it, and judge whether they're upset about it as well. So he's reaching into his viewers' minds. And
he doesn't care.
He doesn't
He does care.
He went to Qatar, for God's sake.
He went to Qatar, exactly. If he really cared about humans, he wouldn't have gone to Qatar, would he?
If he didn't care, then he would just apologise and be like, "Oh, it was like you said in your monologue that it was a gaffe. It was not a gaffe. He meant to say it, and he stood by and he's doubled down."
Well, I'm calling it a gaffe because if you work for the BBC, that is a gaffe.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, he can sing from the rooftops, do what he wants, but not with the BBC, because we are paying his wages. That is the thing. And you know, when the lefties are getting their knickers in a twist about this, he's got Alistair Campbell, the spin doctor, spinning for him. There's Keir Starmer sticking up for him. Well, you know what, Gary? If you lose your job, maybe Keir can give him a job with Gary Neville. Imagine that. These two.
Two Garys.
I mean, it is unbelievable. But I think now the BBC, what are they going to do? Because Gary's not going to say sorry. No. And I think his... and I'm sorry, to do that tweet with the link to the Nazis, and I know he didn't actually say the word Nazi, but it was interpreted that way. It's offended many people I know, including many of my friends who are in the Jewish community, and it is quite revolting that he has not apologised. So what do the BBC do? Because they're not going to back down either. So what's going to happen?
He's conjured up, like, obviously, there's this horrific allegory, whatever, this awful metaphor, and there are segments of what he says where you can kind of understand, but it is...
What do you mean, segments? Which segments?
Well, I mean, the fact that it is, you know, disallowing, but, like, making people, like... What Suella says about an invasion, 100 million people...
Oh, for goodness sake.
It's making immigrants look like vermin, and
because
they're still human beings, no matter how they get here, they're still human beings, and that's what he's trying to say.
That's not the point, though, is it? The point is that people are taking advantage of our asylum system. They're taking advantage of the laws that surround it, and they're taking advantage quite clearly, and we can see that happening. There is nobody that will deny that, you know, people coming from Albania certainly do not really need to be seeking asylum in the United Kingdom. So there are people, large swathes of people, taking advantage of a system that isn't fit for purpose.
But the system doesn't work.
And it needs to be changed. Something needs to happen. Now, if you think about Germany in the 30s, right, where there was a system where it eventually led to extermination of an almost entire race, and you are now talking about a system that is aiming to stop stop people from crossing a channel and making a dangerous crossing so it saves lives, why on earth would you think that the government trying to stop that would be a bad thing?
Well, it's incendiary language coming from Gary, obviously, and that's what's got everybody, upset.
But we don't want his political views.
I know. Yes, I know that.
I am not on my own here. Practically everyone I speak to is absolutely sick of it, and that's why we love pundits like Roy Keane, who knows everything about football. Looks like he's going to bite your head off when you don't agree with him. But we don't know what he feels on Brexit. That's why he's a winner. And I'm sorry, Gary Lineker. Enough is enough, and they should throw the book at him. He's a hypocrite.
And
if he really felt that much about human, how the well-being of humans, he should have gone to Qatar.
But he does feel...
No, he went to Qatar. How could he even stalk? Well, listen, if you're kind of, worrying that, what am I going to do? There's no match of the day tonight. It's terrible.
Well, let's see what the ratings are.
Well, exactly. I think they'll be higher without them. I'd be so happy for that to be the case. But to give match of the day a miss, why not? Why don't you do that tonight? You could perhaps join us, because the BBC has suspended Gary Lineker. But we here at GB News could help you out by bringing you our star-studded lineup from 10 o'clock. With us now is presenter Patrick Christie. Again, he's everywhere.
He is, isn't
if there's ever a gap, let's get Christie's in. Christie's, do you live here, Christie's?
Yeah, I do. This is my bed. This couch. Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, first and foremost, we're going to have a laugh tonight, OK, between 10 and 11. But we are going to try and do it as properly as we possibly can. So we're going to bring you all 6 games, and we're going to bring you pictures of those and top analysis as well, all of the facts that you'll need for your die-hard football fans. We do have some great pundits lined up as well, including Ada McGee, of course, who's an institution in the football punditry world. Mike Parry as well, those people know him. A few guests dotted along the way as well. I'm keeping a couple of names just up my sleeve for the moment, so you're going to have to find out a bit later in the day who they are, but it's exciting stuff. And yeah, 10 till 11, we're just going to do it, and we're going to give the public what they want.
Oh, I like that tease on the guests, Patrick. You don't know who they are, do you?
No, we do. I know. The thing is, though, there is someone we've got lined up who is gonna ruffle more than a few feathers. It's fair to say. So you're gonna have to keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, seriously though, we can do enough of the football side of things. We've got enough material to be able to go off that. So for your actual football fans, it will be a good watch, genuinely. And to be honest with you, we're just gonna have a bit of a laugh as well. Why not? It's Saturday night. It's to be 10 p.m. Let's get giggling.
Lovely. Patrick, looking forward to that. Thank you so much. That's Patrick Christie. Make sure you join him at 10 o'clock. Right, Lizzie and Sam, what do you think? Alternative match of the day here on GB News?
Fantastic, refreshing, I can't wait. And you got my friend Eamon Holmes on as well.
Hey!
As long as it's not about football, I'll watch it.
Well, listen, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Today, I've got 4 voices. I'm going to start with Julie Ford in Bedford. Julie, what do you think? Should we suspend Gary Lineker? The BBC right?
Oh, my goodness, Nana, where do I start? I was away on holiday for a week and I've come back to this. I mean, goodness me. I think they were right to suspend him, absolutely. What he said was not right. In his tweet, he said he didn't agree with the language of the policy. Well, to be honest, I don't like his language. I think his language was abhorrent, to be honest with you. But what I want to know is, why does he have so much power? Why does what he said has made such a big thing? Why are all of his colleagues and pundits coming out in solidarity? What are they in solidarity about? Do they support his tweet?
I think,
what is it all about? And why is he so powerful?
I think they're all scared of him, to be honest with you. Let's go to Alan McNeely, who's in Grimsby. Alan McNeely, you've got about 30 seconds, Al.
Good afternoon, Nana. Yeah, I'd agree with your panel. I think he should be suspended. I would go further and say that he should be sacked. And all those people who pulled out of their contracts today to screw up the BBC's coverage of the sport, BBC, it's a good opportunity for them to look at that and say, well, thanks very much, gentlemen, but we're going to replace you with someone who doesn't have your political view. So, yeah, the sooner he goes, for me, the better. I can't stand the man.
Loads of people can't stand him. Lee Harris, what do you think?
Absolutely. At last, Nana, a bit of backbone from the BBC. For starters, his tweet was historically illiterate and insulting to the majority of the electorate, which polling shows support government action to stop the small boats. But it was highly partisan, and the reference to 1930s Germany was distasteful, and it clearly crossed the line. But he basically put the BBC in an impossible position, and it's not for the first time. All he probably had to do was apologise, delete the tweet, and agree to his social media obligations. But it appears he's decided to act like a petulant child instead. So, of course, they had to act. Gary Lineker is not bigger than the BBC. But can I just say, people defending Gary Lineker on freedom of speech grounds are being intellectually dishonest. This is clearly not a free speech issue. This is about the BBC's obligation to be impartial. Gary Lineker can say what he likes if he leaves the BBC, and even though I disagree with his pearl-clutching woke nonsense, I would defend his right to do so. What I find quite amusing is the people defending him clearly don't want the BBC to be impartial, so they're indirectly calling for an end to the licence fee. Bring it on.
Well, you know, Jonathan Jones, final word to you. Got about 30 seconds.
Thanks, Nana. Yeah, they gave themselves no choice, I'm afraid. The BBC got to cancel one side and the other. So I think they should get a cup of tea and talk it through and stop this cancelling each other. Give people a freedom of speech to express their views. That's what I think.
And we'll be paying for it. I don't think so, Jonathan. Thank you very much. So always lovely to see you. That's Jonathan Jones in Cornwall, Julie in Bedford, Alan in Grimsby and Lee in Bristol. Let's remind you of the statement that the BBC released. The BBC has been in extensive discussions with Gary and his team in recent days. We've said that we consider his recent social media activity to be a breach of our guidelines. The BBC has decided that he will step back from presenting Match of the Day until we've got an agreed and clear position on his use of social media. When it comes to leading our football and sports coverage, Gary is second to none. We have never said that Gary should be an opinion-free zone or that he can't have a view on issues that matter to him, but we have said that he should keep well away from taking sides on party political issues or political controversies. Well, you're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for the Royal Roundup. I'll be joined in the studio by royal biographer Angela Levin to discuss all the latest happenings in the royal household. Stay tuned.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Well, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. It's royal roundup time, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have said that it is their children's birthright to be called Prince and Princess, and King Charles has granted Prince Edward the title of Duke of Edinburgh for his 59th birthday. As you know, I love to give you that rundown, and who better to do so than royal biographer Angela Levin. Angela, God, there's a lot going on in the royal circles. Where should we start?
I think we should start with the new Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, actually. They've worked incredibly hard. They've been quiet. They don't make a big fuss. They just get on with things. The late Queen used to say she really loved Sophie because she wouldn't know she was in the room.
Aww.
I mean, but it was a compliment because she's, you know, as compared to other people who make a big fuss about everything. And I think that it's lovely that she's also become very beautiful. And one of those women who, the older she gets, the more beautiful she is. And I thought to myself on the way here, you know, the cartoon that made fun of Harry and Meghan when he looked down the throat and it was an echo and there's nothing there. I think he would find compassion, kindness, gentleness. It would be a very different sort of throat to look down. And I think that she's been a wonderful wife to Prince Edward, because he made a bit of a mess of it. He didn't like being in the military. He didn't do well at university. He got 2 D's and an E, I think, for his A-levels. And he just didn't really know who he was. But once he married her 24 years ago, she sorted it all out. She got on to help do things for people who lived nearby who weren't very rich or had issues, and do more and more for the family. And we see photographs of them all over the world, but we don't really send people and get to know them really well. And I hope now that they've got the best title, that they will know more. What I wonder is whether Harry and Meghan had heard this. They've got a spy here, and they knew that they were getting it. So they had to get their Prince and Princess Lilibet in
Right. You think
before.
you think that's why they did that?
Well, I think that's after the fact that, you know, that they'd had a bad time with Frogmore, that they would actually come back with that, a tit for tat, in mighty letters. And also they could come in the middle of the other one that's coming out. And, you know, if you saw Meghan's smirk as she went walking in USA, which we haven't seen anything of her for ages, that she was all confident and happy that she'd scored a goal. But I think it's actually awful to manage your children in that sort of way. They said before that they knew that they had this birthright, but they wouldn't do anything and let them see what they want to do when they're older. But actually they've slammed that down. And although little girls want to be a princess at a party, I don't think they want to be a princess with other little girls, because they'll make fun of them, they'll bully her. And I think it's very difficult. It's a huge burden for a young girl to have.
Yeah,
and I think it's a great shame.
It's like Meghan's dream, isn't it? What about Camilla's International Women's Day reception?
Well, that was really interesting because of the women that she got. I mean, she did it despite the fact she lost her brother-in-law. He died, and they were very close. Even him and his sister went on honeymoon with them to Scotland. But she was very up to it, and it was a whole range of, you know, I've got the numbers down here. The people who were in Happy Valley, the star of Happy Valley, she came and she was thrilled to meet the princess. But I think she was the only one who allowed her husband to come. So there we are.
Well, I need to finish on Ngozi Fulani.
Ngozi Fulani.
I watched her on ITV. Sounded like to me when I was listening that she was asking for money. That's what it sounded like. Because
it sounded like to me as well. She wanted to be bought. She wanted to bring it all up after everybody had been very polite and apologised and said, you know, let's leave it now. We're all happy. Absolutely. And then she would go home and think a few weeks later, actually, I should get some money out of this.
Well, she was saying that she wasn't protected and all this, and that it wasn't fair. Then she had to pay money for PR and things. And it was like, you went on national TV deciding to spill your guts about this conversation. It's your own fault.
Yes, I mean, I quite agree with you. And she's resigned temporarily from her charity, which just supports African women and girls who've been, attacked.
Well, they'd turn you away then, Angela, if you weren't, because you're not black. 111. Thank you so much. This royal biographer, Angela 11. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome on board. If you've just joined me for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. On the way, my difficult conversation. I'll be speaking to both a domestic abuse survivor and a movie producer. They've created an award-winning short film based on a true story of enduring domestic abuse. They launched it on International Women's Day. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The BBC has apologised and says it's working hard to resolve the situation after experiencing a mass boycott by its sports presenters. It comes after Gary Lineker was forced to step back from Match of the Day over a tweet criticising the government's migration policy. The show will go ahead this evening, but Alan Shearer and Ian Wright have both backed out. Meanwhile, Football Focus and Final Score have been cancelled after Alex Scott and Jason Mohammed said they won't appear on the show. Lib Dem leader Fred Davies now calling on the BBC chairman Richard Sharp to resign, whilst Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the corporation is in the wrong.
The BBC is not acting impartially by caving in to Tory MPs who are complaining about Gary Lineker. They've got this one badly wrong, and now they're very, very exposed, as is the government, because at the heart of this is the government's failure on the asylum system. And rather than take responsibility for the mess they've made, the government is casting around to blame anybody else, Gary Lineker, the BBC, civil servants, the Blob. What they should be doing is standing up, accepting they've broken the asylum system and telling us what they're going to do to actually fix it, not whinging on about Gary Lineker.
In other news, the Chancellor has told GB News he wants Britain to have the most competitive business tax rates amid calls to scrap a planned hike in corporation tax. Ahead of Wednesday's budget, Jeremy Hunt spoke to Esther McVeigh and Philip Davies on his plans to deliver growth and tackle inflation. He said the corporation tax increase from 19 to 25% would still leave the UK with a lower rate than nearly all major rivals. But he said he was committed to previous promises of bringing corporation tax down.
We now have is a responsible outlook for public finances. The markets have recognised that by bringing down mortgage rates, interest rates, and we're on track to bring inflation down. But if you're saying to me, as a Conservative Chancellor, do I want to bring down taxes? Well, I want to bring down personal taxes because that is at the heart of what being a Conservative is. But I want to bring down business taxes even more.
Junior doctors say they've been left with no choice but to strike on Monday after the Health Secretary failed to attend talks on Friday. It comes after Steve Barclay said he wanted them to call off their three-day walkout and negotiate. Nearly 40,000 junior doctors belonging to the British Medical Association voted to take industrial action. They're demanding a 35% pay rise and warn future strikes could last longer than 72 hours. NHS England says more than 100,000 patients have been treated in virtual wards over the last year. The patients stay in their own homes whilst receiving treatment and have their vital signs monitored remotely. Medical bosses say the scheme has been a real game changer, helping patients to avoid unnecessary hospital trips and enabling them to be discharged sooner. Now, a man has been arrested under the Terrorism Act after the new IRA claimed responsibility for the shooting of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell. It follows the search of a property in the Londonderry area. Police say the 25-year-old will also be questioned over a hoax security alert. Earlier, a typed message was posted on a wall in Derry claiming responsibility for Mr. Caldwell's attempted murder. He remains critically ill in hospital after being shot several times in Omagh. Silicon Valley Bank UK says it will be put into insolvency from tomorrow evening. It comes after its parent company in America was put under US government control, becoming the biggest failure of a US bank since the 2008 financial crisis. Both the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England have spoken together about the collapse. The government says it's been speaking to affected customers and they'll be holding discussions with industry leaders later today. And Tom Hanks has been named Worst Supporting Actor at the Razzie Awards. A warning for those watching us on TV, the following contains flashing images. The Oscar-winning actor was chosen for his depiction of Colonel Tom Parker in the movie Elvis. His portrayal of Presley's former manager was described by judges as cruel, and they also slammed his character's latex face. The awards honour poor performances in Hollywood movies and are held the day before the Oscars on a Sunday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana.
Hello, good afternoon. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online, and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, and also political commentator Sam Dowler. Still to come in my difficult conversation today, it's with domestic abuse survivor and motivational speaker Andrea Eviat and director Lindsay Attenborough. They'll be joining me in the studio now. Their award-winning short film was screened in Parliament this week. I actually went to watch it, and it provided a strong voice to survivors of domestic abuse. And bear in mind, of course, this week was International Women's Day. Now, I'll be speaking to them about their work. Then stay tuned, because afterwards it's time for my Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, who do you trust to take on immigration? Yesterday, Sunak and French President Emmanuel Macron agreed to a new deal to tackle illegal migration after a visit to Paris. Now, this includes extra law enforcement officers who will use enhanced technology and intelligence insights to try and prevent illegal channel crossings. All of that at the cost of £500 million, and that will be distributed over 3 years. So will this new deal, as well as the illegal migration bill, finally solve the channel crossings crisis? Come and find out later. We'll be discussing that. I'll be joined by former legend, also footballing legend and pundit Matt Le Tissier. He'll be giving us his thoughts on Gary Lineker and his suspension. You won't want to miss that. As ever, email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Now it's time for this week's difficult conversation. Andrea Eviat is a domestic abuse survivor. Now, she's used her time in an abusive relationship to become a motivational speaker, to speak out on issues that women face and help abused women move forward in life. Now, Andrea's campaign against domestic abuse has earned her a British Empire Medal, and Andrea has published a book titled White Sorrow, detailing her abusive relationship to her recovery. She's also collaborated with writer, producer and director Lindsay Attenborough to create a micro-short film based on her book. And I'm pleased to say that writer, producer and director Lindsay Attenborough and domestic abuse survivor and award-winning motivational speaker Andrea Eviat join me now. Right, so welcome. Really good to see you both. Now, obviously, this week was International Women's Day. We had a day there. And I actually went to see the film, and it was such an inspiration meeting you. And I think sometimes we don't tell these stories. So firstly, Andrea, tell me a bit about your story.
So my story starts with someone who's wanting to be in a beautiful relationship, full of love, new beginnings, new start, happy marriage. And it's as if like my entire world turns upside down because from the very next day after I say I do, life just takes a different turn. And I'm faced with a shocking reality of, what I thought was going to be and what I actually end up with.
Was it an arranged marriage, or did you, or were you with this person for a while?
No, so it was actually a love marriage. And every young girl wants, her fairy tale Prince Charming. So I came and I fell in love with him, and my parents are very strict, Orthodox, mother's Catholic, Roman Catholic, no staying before, marriage with anyone. And so we got married, and then like, there was a lot of different things which I thought, yes, this is my Prince Charming. And then, no, it was a love marriage. It went absolutely wrong the other way, completely 360 degrees.
That's interesting. And of course, when you were in this situation, did you have children? And what did you do? How did you get out?
So I've got 2 beautiful children. They are my source of strength. And that's the main reason as to why I got out, because I saw a lot of things happening. I saw my parents' relationship, which was very loving. My father's always giving. And I saw my relationship, and that made me think, this is not how a relationship is actually meant to be. And when I got to see that, then I thought, I want more for my children, and I want more for them, and I want a nice, happy life, like an upbringing like what I was used to. And then I decided I need to leave because the relationship wasn't, a loving one. It wasn't going very well. There was a lot of verbal abuse. There was mental abuse, coercive control. And it was as if the person had a split personality completely.
That's so sad when that happens. You're in something that you think is great and it turns like that. Yes. So you decided to do something about this.
Yes.
Because a lot of people would just think, I don't have the strength to go forward and do that. But you decided to do something about it. So how did the collaboration between you and Lindsay happen?
So we were introduced by Richard Swellen Barnett, who is a business networker. Yes. And Andrea, obviously, I had already written a short film about an abuse survivor, inspired by a friend of mine and her relationship. She's not really a comedian, she's just very funny, but she became a comedian in my story. And of course, the way I'd written it, it was quite like motivational speeches. So I'd been looking for somebody really brave, and I actually wanted to collaborate with a real survivor. So when Andrea spoke to me about her idea, it's like, that's very strange. I'm trying to do exactly the same thing. So it was kind of serendipitous and wonderful. And we joined forces, and obviously I was able to very quickly, because I'd been immersed in this universe already, adapt to her story and write a new script based on her experiences. But she'd self-funded. It's very hard to get funding for films.
It must be, mustn't it? And well, I mean, we've talked about it. I'd love to see. We've got a trailer actually of part of the film. Let's show you a bit of the film. Let's have a look at the trailer.
You've been on a mission to take my pride away from me. You don't ever listen, and you live with your complacency. You don't scare me, but you should fear me. The sun is setting, don't trust your hearing. You made a monster, I'm your imposter. Go ahead and wander, but don't trust the water.
Wow. So it looks, we want to watch that. It's like, talk, What was it like? Because you actually, in the film, you're the actress playing yourself.
Yes.
How was that playing yourself?
It was liberating and also very empowering and very emotional. And I'm so glad that Lindsay came on board and was supporting me during that, because when you're not an actress, not everyone wants to give you that opportunity. But the one thing I did know is I wanted to reach out to other survivors and other ladies who are still being a victim in that situation.
Not Immigrant Watch, Migration Watch.
Something is very easy. That's your profession.
I've been running it.
Someone who's gone through that as a survivor, who's actually starved, during pregnancy, who's gone through that abuse, that mental torment, having the strength to walk out of that, I feel that's what helps me connect to others. It helps me show them that if I could do it, they can do it.
Now, I noticed that one of the things you said was that actually during the whole thing that you went through, you didn't really cry. But then when you're actually doing the film, that's when the tears came.
Yes, because it's like you're being strong for your kids, and you're thinking, what do I do? Because I came from a very influential, well-off background, and it's like I've never seen anything like this before. I never knew about food banks and about where to get help, where to go, who to reach out to. And so I thought, what can I do? And then I had to look about how to go through the divorce, how to go through the courts, and figure everything out on my own. So when you're in that moment, And the funny thing is that I actually met someone who had gone through that, and the lady was telling me, don't be in my situation, Andrea, whatever you do, don't be like me, because she was much elderly, and I met her at work. Her entire family turned against her. She lost her house. Her kids resented her for staying in that relationship and putting them through that day in and day out and not having the courage to walk out. So all these different things in my head, the security guard at work telling me, Andrea, I don't want to meet you 10 years down the line and you're still crying about the same things, or you're telling me this is how you're, you're unhappy and this is what's happening. Nobody's coming to do anything unless you do it. So I had to be strong. When there's no one there for you, you've got to be strong. And then once you're out of it and you're doing it all again, it's like, that happened.
Well, listen, Lindsay, if people want to see the film, how can they get to see the film? Where can they go?
We haven't yet published it.
You haven't published it yet? When will it be out?
So we will do by the end of this week, coming week, next week. We'll absolutely publish it. We'll probably put it on your YouTube channel.
Well, where if people they're listening now and want to find out, where do they need to go to find it when it's out?
They can even go to my website, which is andreaaviet.org, and it will be shown over there. It's just we were waiting because we were in the festival run, and it's done immensely well, and for the House of Commons. And so now, since all that is over, we can start, sharing it.
Well, listen, I really look forward to seeing the film. I've seen it, but it's very good. But I will watch it again. And listen, if you're interested as well, check out Andrea Aviet. If you go, they're spelled Andrea, A-N-D-R-E-A, Aviet, A-V-I-E-T. Thank you so much for both of you joining me, Lindsay Attleborough and Andrea. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you. The film is called Don't Cry. Coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, who do you trust to take on immigration? The UK is set to help fund a detention centre on French soil in an attempt to try to stop the flow of migrants crossing into the UK via the Channel. The deal was agreed in Paris yesterday between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and President Emmanuel Macron at the summit to tackle the issue. Will the Conservatives be able to turn this crisis around? Stay tuned to find out.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Good afternoon. This is coming out to 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. And don't forget, you can also download the GB News app for free. I'm Nana Akua. It's time, though, for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, who do you trust to take on immigration? The UK is set to help fund a detention centre on French soil in an attempt to try to stop the flow of migrants crossing into the UK via the Channel. The deal was agreed in Paris yesterday between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and also President Emmanuel Macron at a summit to tackle the issue. Now, the UK is expected to contribute £480 million in funding over the next 3 years to help this happen, and they're expected to be fully operational by 2026. Now, will this collaboration, do you think, with the French government and the government's new illegal migration bill finally put an end to the migrant crisis? Well, Labour don't think so. Just like the Rwanda scheme, Starmer thinks this will be a failure. But has Labour got a viable alternative to stop the crossings? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, who do you trust to take on immigration? Joining me now is Chair of Migrant Watch, Alp Mehmet, former Labour Minister for Europe, Dennis McShane, Conservative councillor and former Special Advisor to the Home Office for Immigration Minister Claire Pearsall, and Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. I'll start with you, Alp. This immigration bill, the plans that they tried to put forward, what were your thoughts on it?
First of all, Migration Watch, not Migrant Watch, please, Nana.
Did I not say that? I thought I said Migration Watch.
No.
I said Migrant Watch. Sorry.
The bill, I think, is certainly a very important step. There's a lot of flaws. There's a lot yet to be done, which can be rectified as it goes through Parliament. As it is, I think that it probably will get held up in the courts. Whether we like it or not, I'm afraid that the only way that this crisis is going to be solved is if we start returning people who come here illegally. Mm-hmm. And that would appear is what the bill intends to achieve.
So do you think this is a good step forward then?
I do. And this is the commitment. The commitment for the Home Secretary to be required to return those who arrive illegally, that is significant. And I believe that if they eventually get to actually putting it into practice, then it will have an impact.
Well, Rebecca Jane, what do you think?
Well, there's the problem. I agree with a lot of actually what you've just said, Alp. But unfortunately, I have no trust or faith in the Conservatives, but I wouldn't do given my position. So we've heard a lot of these plans and stunts that they have tried to get through, and they don't, because they are all doomed to fail because of the detail, and they do get held up. You know, we only have to look at the Rwanda plan. We've heard exactly the same speech from Boris Johnson and from Suella Braverman this week. Literally the same one as a year ago, saying it's going to fix the problem. It's not. And it's not because the Conservatives don't have a handle on this. They don't know what they're doing. And it's time for a new party to step in with better plans and actually can see them through.
Dennis, you're sort of chucking there.
Well, only the idea that there's a party that has the answer. I started life as a young activist fighting racism late 1960s when Enoch Powell was calling for the repatriation of all the immigrants, including people like Suella Braverman's parents or Rishi Sunak's parents. That was his big idea.
Well, what's that got to do with it, Dennis?
Very simply, that each succeeding decade, and Alp's an old friend, we worked together in the Foreign Office when he was a distinguished ambassador, I was a minister. Each decade, each government tries to do something, but when you get surges of people impelled to move, and the idea of, Emmanuel Macron's laughing all the way to the bank. The British taxpayers just given him nearly £500 million to play with. And they're not going to stop a single Zodiac little dinghy when the warm weather comes filling up with these people on a 100-mile coastline and trying to get to Britain.
Do you think? Claire Pissell?
Funnily enough, I actually agree with some of what Dennis was saying, and I do think this is perhaps a failure of successive governments and each party which has their own distinct idea of what the migration problem is. But I do think the Conservative Party have now made some real strides to look at how you solve that. And yes, we have just given a very large amount of money over to Emmanuel Macron, who is going to be incredibly happy with his own performance. But it is going to be essential to have his help going forward with the EU Commission when we look to set up these returns deals with the rest of the EU. So I do think that some investment, unfortunately, is needed. It is a large amount, and let's hope it brings results.
But you know, Rebecca Jane points out that we've heard this time and time again, and to be fair, I am with her in many respects that we have. What makes this one different, Claire?
I don't disagree with you in that respect. I really don't. And you and I have spoken previously on immigration, where I have been really quite against what the Conservative government is doing. However, when you start looking at what all the other parties have to offer, it really is incredibly little. The Labour Party is so tied up with trying to make sure that they have a go at the Conservative government without coming forward with any policies other than beefing up the National Crime Agency. The Lib Dems similarly seem to want to just be fair to everybody, which in immigration terms you can never be. And then you look at the Greens, who would basically allow anyone to be here if there's an ecological disaster. And if they've been here for 5 years illegally, well, they'll just stay. So at the very least, the Conservatives are coming up with some plans where other parties are failing to do so.
Sorry, Nana, can I come in on that?
I was about to ask you.
Can I just refocus this debate on what it is that we're talking about? The bill is intended to deal with the crisis that we now have in the Channel. That is what we are debating at the moment. How do you stop those boats? How do you stop people from jumping into flimsy dinghies and risking their lives and making their way over here? That's what we're talking about. There's all sorts of things to debate about wider issues involving migration. But on this particular point, how do we stop it? And the only way we're going to stop it is to show that if you jump into a dinghy, get across here, it's not going to work, you're not going to stay. Then they will stop trying to get here by whatever means they can.
Well, you're right there, but the discussion is actually who do you trust with the whole idea of this policy. So whilst that is a consideration, Alp, do you trust the Conservative Party on this particular issue? Well, do you trust them more than Labour? Would you trust a Labour government to do it?
To be honest, I don't think that any of the parties, certainly the main parties, both Conservatives and Labour, have covered themselves in glory in dealing with this issue over the years. And that goes to... illegal immigration is nothing new. What is new is them jumping into boats and coming across. The Tories, I think they've failed, partly because they didn't really make the effort that was necessary when it all started 4 or 5 years ago. They are now. There's an election coming up, dare I say, so they know that they've got to get it right. With regard to the bill, it won't do the job, and it will be a while before it's implemented. However, there are all sorts of gaps and loopholes in it at the moment, and those need to be addressed as well if it's going to have any effect.
Isn't the problem, Nana, that for the last 3 years, 4 years, all we've had from Boris Johnson and Suella Braverman is non-stop insults to the French. Donny Nouveau-Brake, Liz Truss, Macron, the jury's out on him. Really offensive, insulting language, which I know from all my friends in France, it upsets them. You don't talk to mature countries. No,
it works both ways, Dennis. Are you saying that the French haven't been... They've been pretty hostile towards the British as well?
They can be. They didn't like, for example...
They didn't like Brexit.
They didn't. I didn't give a toss about Brexit.
They didn't like Brexit.
They didn't like, for example, us invading Afghanistan and Iraq. And we wouldn't have all the Afghans...
Well, that was done well before, a few years ago.
But they didn't attack Blair. Johnson went out of his way to be rude, patronising, sneering, dismissive of Macron and the French, as did other ministers and the press.
I don't think you can say that. I don't think that's necessarily fair. They weren't happy with Brexit.
If you don't, for heaven's sake.
They weren't happy with it.
Do you not... Now, let me tell you, in the rest of Europe, Brexit is seen as something that's brought the rest of Europe together. All the anti-Europeans, like Marine Le Pen and Matteo Salvini, they've dropped their anti-European discourse. From their point of view... But you don't want to get
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? That's not true. Look at what's happened in Italy. People are actually going... If anything, Europe has become more to the right since Brexit, I would say.
But Giorgia Meloni's dropped all her anti-EU, anti-Euro lines.
OK, let's stick to
She's
something
being allowed
now.
to push
OK, so Dennis.
Sorry.
So do you trust the Labour Party, then, with immigration and the policy? That's what the question is. Do you trust them? Who do you trust?
I don't see clear evidence from the Labour Party, except it is willing to engage more broadly with Europe, not to go back to the EU.
All right, that's enough. That's enough. So I can't take any more. No, I've had enough. Enough. You had enough. I've had enough.
All right, keep the problem going, Dan.
Nana, the Labour Party's policies and proposals for policies on the Channel, frankly, don't add up. What they're saying is we'll deal with the traffickers and we'll deal with the gangs. Well, that's happening anyway, and we are working with the French and others to address that particular point. The other thing they're saying is, well, what we've got to do is reduce the backlog. Neither of those points really will make the blindest bit of difference to the numbers who are coming over.
I had thousands of asylum cases when I was an MP, and none of them were treated. Patrick Christie, a very distinguished GB News presenter, did a great film.
Patrick Christie?
He's not, all right.
Patrick Christie.
Forgive me.
Christie.
He did a great report from somewhere near Marlow, and he found an Eritrean colonel who fled for his life, because otherwise he's going to be killed and tortured, landed here in 2015, and last November, whenever it was, his case still hadn't been heard. So,
Claire, I'm going to come to Claire.
We need more officials to deal with this quickly.
Claire,
you need to deal with it.
Claire, do you think that the Conservative Party, then, do you think they're going to be able to pull it off? Do you think the Conservative Party will be able to pull it off? Because I think if they solve immigration, they could actually potentially win the election. Do you think they can pull it off?
I mean, I agree with you. If they can manage to pull this off, then they absolutely will save the next election. But it is going to get held up by the courts. It's got to get through the Commons and the Lords yet. So there hopefully will be some good amendments being made. But fingers crossed, I think this is probably more positive than we've seen over the last 18 months.
Rebecca Jane, you also, do you think they can pull it off? We've only got about 10 seconds, so we'll have to... Rebecca Jane.
I'm just infuriated by the whole thing. You can't trust any of them. Nobody's got a decent plan. It's not going to go through. We're all wishful thinking, and it's not going to happen.
I don't know. Outmem 10 seconds.
It's probably not going to happen anytime soon. I don't think any of the parties at the moment have shown that they're up to it. The Tories have made a useful start this time.
Dennis, you've had enough.
Simply this time next year, bring us back, and if no more boats across the Channel, I'll buy out and everybody the biggest drink in the world, but it's not going to reduce it. I'm sorry.
Well, we'll hold you to that, Dennis McShane. Thank you very much. Claire Pearce, Conservative Councillor and former Special Advisor. Rebecca Jane, Deputy Leader of UKIP, and Out Mehmet, Chair for Migration Watch. Thank you so much for joining me. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, we'll continue with our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, who do you trust to take on immigration? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also broadcaster and political commentator Sam Dowler. Then Matt Le Tissier will be joining me to give me his thoughts on the Gary Lineker suspension. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The BBC has apologised and says it's working hard to resolve the situation after experiencing a mass boycott by its sports presenters. It comes after the broadcaster forced Gary Lineker to step back from Match of the Day over a tweet that was critical of the government. The show will go ahead tonight, but Alan Shearer and Ian Wright have both backed out. Meanwhile, Football Focus and Final Score were cancelled after Alex Scott and Jason Mohammed said they won't appear on the shows. The Chancellor has told GB News he wants Britain to have the most competitive business tax rates amid calls to scrap a planned hike in corporation tax. Ahead of Wednesday's budget, Jeremy Hunt spoke exclusively about his plans to deliver growth and tackle inflation. He said the increase from 19 to 25% would still leave the UK with a lower corporation tax rate than nearly all major rivals. And a 25-year-old man has been arrested under the Terrorism Act after the new IRA claimed responsibility for the shooting of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell. It follows the search of a property in the Londonderry area. Police say the man will also be questioned over a hoax security alert. Mr. Caldwell remains critically ill in hospital after being shot several times in Omagh. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB plus radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 39 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Don't forget as well, you can stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for our great British debate this hour, and I'm asking, who do you trust to take on immigration? Now, the UK is set to help fund a detention centre on French soil in an attempt to try to stop the flow of migrants crossing into the UK via the Channel from France, by the way. Now, the deal was agreed in Paris yesterday between Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and President Emmanuel Macron at a summit to tackle the issue. The UK is expected to contribute almost £500 million in funding over the next 3 years to help the measures which are expected to be fully operational by 2026. But you think the Conservatives can turn this crisis around? So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, who do you trust to take on immigration? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also broadcaster and political commentator Sam Downer. Just giving up on the single shots now. They get ready for their singles, they love it. Right, so Lizzie Cundy, who do you trust? I mean, there's who have we got? We've got Reform, or is it Reclaim? I don't know which one. Yeah. We've got the Labour Party, we've got the Conservative Party, or nobody. None of them. None of the above.
Certainly not Rishi, I'll tell you something.
Really?
13 backslaps they did, Macron and him. Do you know that? I counted 13. It was not only sickening.
Relevant.
It was sick-making, it was a waste of time, and it's certainly a waste of money. For me, it will be the Reform Party, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, what Rishi's doing at the minute is just a sticking plaster on a wooden leg and giving all that money yet again to France. I mean, France want this. I really do believe France want this to be a huge and bigger problem in the UK, because the more it is a bigger problem, the more money we seem to give them. And it is just terrible. We need to get this sorted. We need to get them processed. We need to be able to turn the boats back when they're actually in the channel, you know, turn them back and send them back to where they came from. That is the way.
Border Force weren't prepared to do that, though, so that's a... And also, the risk was that when the boats are turned back, people may jump off the boats, and then this will become a rescue operation.
He's still saying he's not taking them back, OK? So what are we going to do with the huge amounts that we have already? What are we actually going to be able to do?
The plan was that they're going to have a sort of processing centre in France. They were also going to set up a specific kind of police force type thing that would deal specifically with the migrants as well. And there'd be a lot of joint cooperation. So, I mean, isn't it a start, at least, Sam?
We've got a backlog of 150,000 at the moment, which is a ginormous amount of people. So, like, I mean, and it is down to this government to have sorted that system out first. I mean, like, get them processed. Like, if you're going to send to Rwanda or wherever, get them processed. But they're not doing that, and that is this Tory government. That is this Tory government's fault. What's so
the
funny?
fact that it's something like 13 people or something they processed.
Yeah, I know.
Like, what?
I know.
What are we paying these people for?
So the thing is, their stop the boats is just another, you know, get Brexit done. It's just a way of deflection or distraction from the Tory. Let me finish, Lizzie. From the Tory government, and also if this was a Labour government and they gave £500 million to France, everyone would be like, well, look at the Labour government just giving France the money back to the EU, etc. Like, this is a total mess, and it has to be. And there are so many moving parts. But it is the Tory government that should have sorted out the 150,000 backlog we've already got.
No, I agree with that. I never usually agree with you, Sam, but I'm agreeing with you there. It's this Tory government is all spin, waffle, and no action, and they're beginning to be the party of the headlines rather than the party of any action, and that is the trouble.
So you're not prepared to give Rishi Sunak any credit? Listen, I don't particularly think anything much of Rishi, but he managed to do something to Ursula von der Leyen. You saw what happened to her eyes. He did the same thing to President Macron. So Boris did the very opposite with these people, right? So as a result of... there was a 5-year gap between the summit, because they literally despised Boris Johnson and the administrations and those who have looked after the post and head of the government since. So finally, we've got one who's actually speaking the same language, appearing to be the same height as all of them, actually.
No, actually slightly short.
Managing to somehow captivate them and get them to speak and get them. And you know what? The French are spending more money than we are in this country to set all this up. Exactly. So somehow Rishi has managed that. Does he not get any credit at all? And do you think Keir Starmer could do anything?
Well, that is it. And Keir Starmer, let's ask you, Sam. Keir Starmer, I mean, he gives advice on everything but responsible for nothing. What is he going to do? Because he didn't mention it, did he? Even mention the boat problem.
But I've said it a million
in his
times.
5
Like,
issues.
this whole problem has just, you know, grown and grown and grown under the Tory government for the last 13 years. So of course it is going to be a Labour government, and so let's see.
Are you sure?
Yeah, of course. Let's see what they can do. Let's see which way they go and come up with some ideas. But it's not election time, so they haven't come up with their ideas yet because they'll just.
But we've got to look at where this started. It's with the smugglers. It's with the gangs.
Yes, of
Why
course,
aren't they going from the grassroots where it starts?
There are so many of them here.
It's like arresting all the people that use drugs, but not the drug suppliers.
I think part of it is trying to cut off the supply, and it's the immediate thing they've got to deal with now. I would agree with you. you, but Keir Starmer's plan has said that he will go after them, after the drug barons, or not the drug barons, sorry, the people smugglers and so on and so forth. But, I mean...
But you see, no gangs, no crossings, simple.
Well, let's see what he can do.
Apparently, a lot of the gangs are probably set up in this country.
I mean, imagine if Keir Starmer came to power and it was all sorted out within a year, and then what would you say then? You'd be like,
I'd say that it's a dream, I'm in a nightmare, and this isn't real.
Right, let me tell you. But why are we always giving to the French? French never pay for lunch.
No, listen,
ever.
They're paying. They're actually.
Come on now.
No. The French are contributing more actually towards the scheme, and it's actually not in their interest to perpetuate this because then they become a draw. But anyway, listen, we need to move on because I want to talk about Gary Lineker. Yeah, exactly. Good, because I'm not letting that go. Following Gary Lineker's suspension, a number of high-profile sports presenters have dropped out of hosting their football shows. Today is in a rally of support for Gary Lineker. This is despite his comments where he compared the government's policy to that of 1930s Germany, or the language that the government were using. So was it right for the BBC to suspend Lineker? Well, joining me now is Southampton legend and football pundit Matt Le Tissier. Matt, thank you very much for joining. Oh, look, try and smile, Sam. You're in it as well.
Sorry.
He was off camera. Off camera face.
This is what they do when they're not on. So, Matt Le Tissier, we had a good conversation yesterday with regard to Ian Wright, who sort of went out and said that people don't know how much this means to me giving up one day of Match of the Day, which I thought, well, actually, I don't care. But what's your take on this? All these BBC pundits and presenters deciding to jump ship for their show for now. What are your thoughts on seeing that? I mean, Ian didn't do that for you.
No, I mean, obviously, Ian worked for a different channel, but decided to weigh in on the matter anyway, and wasn't particularly sympathetic about it all. But, you know, that's up to him. But if these presenters want to show their solidarity with, you know, the angelic Gary Lineker, then that's their prerogative, you know. And if there's consequences to that, then they also have to take the consequences from that. If the BBC actually do, you know, show any kind of mettle and stand up to all their talent, then yeah, they'll just have to take the consequences of their decisions. And if they're happy with that, then that's fine.
Because Gary's considerably richer than them, and of course, if the BBC say, "Well, you ain't coming back," then Gary will be fine. But I don't think some of them, the others, will be. I mean, they're just. I mean, I never even heard of half of them, but well, I hadn't. I mean, had you heard of what's his name, Jason Mohammed? Did you heard of him?
It's quite respectful. I think that they're all doing it with him. I think it's quite. I do like the solidarity, and they will. I mean, obviously, I think their agents will be like steaming out their ears, like, what are you doing? But I think, you know, they're making a point, and you know, but to take on the BBC. And
the interesting thing about them, what I'm kind of a little bit confused about is what they're standing in solidarity with Gary for. Are they standing up? Are they standing up for free speech? Because if they're starting to do that now, where have they been for the last 3 years? Because they've been very quiet on the free speech, and anybody on the other side of the argument, they want to censor and silence, and all of a sudden it's one of their own. It's now, oh no, free speech. You know, you can't pick and choose when it comes to free speech, I'm afraid.
Lizzie.
I was just going to say, Matt, well, I mean, do you not think they should have said more about Qatar and the World Cup being there with the terrible human rights laws? I mean, Gary still went there, got, you know, a ton of money for it, as others did, but no one there stood up and said anything, did they? It's quite hypocritical.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said a few things on GB News regarding that situation. But yeah, I mean, there's hypocrisy all over the place, let's be honest. And it's been blown up, for me, it's been blown up out of all proportions. I think the way to solve it all, actually, or the way to get a little bit of clarity in it all, is for the BBC to publish Gary's contract.
Get rid of Gary.
Once you've done that, we can all read the contract and see exactly what it stipulates in that contract, and then we can make our own mind up whether Gary has breached that contract or not, and then we can have a far better informed opinion of it all.
Matt, I was going to ask you, with Match of the Day tonight, what happens if the ratings are really high? What do you think?
I'm going to switch on my TV just for the hell of it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. What happens?
I'll tell you what will happen, Lizzie. If the ratings are really high, no one will ever know about it.
You think. So you said that they should publish Gary Lineker's contract. If it turns out, which I'm pretty sure he will have a level of loyalty to the notion of impartiality, which is what we all signed up to the BBC, and because he's such a high-paid presenter and such a high-profile one, there'll be a duty of responsibility to him. If it turns out he's breached it, what do you think should happen to him?
Well, if he's breached his contract, then he'll get sacked. Simple as that. If he's signed that contract in good faith and then he's broken that contract, then the BBC are well within their rights to sack him. And then, if Gary wants to appeal that and go through that process, then that's the way it should be done. But let's see how it all pans out. I'm sure that there'll be some kind of compromise, and the lovely Gary will be back on our screens.
Please don't.
Matt, put your name in the hat.
Yeah, put your name in the hat. Oh no, he can't.
BBC,
he's had an opinion.
Got enough money.
Well, listen, Matt Le Tissier, thank you so much for joining us. That's former Southampton and England international footballer and football pundit Matt Le Tissier. Right, well, if you just come in, where have you been? We've only got 5 minutes or so left of the show. But if you're going to give Match of the Day a miss, then tonight, after the BBC suspended Gary Lineker, then don't panic. GBNews is here to help and bring you a star-studded lineup from 10 p.m. tonight. You won't want to miss it. Right, though, it's now time for our quick-fire quiz. This is a part of the show where I test my panel on some of the other topics hitting the headlines right now. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Your buzzer, please, Lizzie. And also political commentator Sam Dowler. Your buzzer, please. And please,
pardon me.
Please play along at home. Right, question 1. The official UK entrant for Eurovision has been announced. But who is it? Is it A, Harry Styles? Is it B, Mew Muller? Or is it C, Sam Smith? Ooh, I think that was Sam.
It's actually my friend Ben Morton, who works for Tap Music, chose her, and it's May Muller, and it's extremely exciting. I've heard the song, I heard it months ago, and it's fantastic.
You're right, but it sounds just like a normal house dance track. It doesn't sound that
great. A bit more nuanced than that, Nana.
I'm not so keen.
I didn't think it was that good.
I listened. We've got to support her.
Yeah, come on now.
Well, she's been hailed the Queen of Sass and has revealed her Eurovision entry to the... But do you think we're going to have any chance of winning this time? Remember, last time they sort of forgot that we weren't in the EU anymore. Yeah. And they liked the fact that we'd sort of joined forces with Ukraine.
Well, it's always political.
Do you think we've got a chance to win this time?
Well, I think we do, and I think we've got to get behind her, and it's at home, isn't it? So we've got all the chances.
It's a fantastic tune. It is at home, and we kind of won last year.
Question 2. True or false? A transgendered woman was awarded a Woman of Courage Award on International Women's Day. True or false? Lizzie Cundy.
True.
It's absolutely true, yes. Alba Rubda, a trans woman, was awarded the Woman of Courage Award. You were right. I mean, she was not a woman.
Good for her. Congratulations.
Yeah, but she's a man, biological man. Question 3. One man from Sussex was kicked out of a McDonald's, but why? A, he stuck his finger in the deep fryer. B, he tried to steal the McDonald's M. C, he refused to wear shoes. Lizzie Cundy.
I'm going to go for B.
You think it's
I don't know the answer to this, but I love it if he did try and steal the McDonald's M.
Well, I'm going to say he stuck his hand in the deep fryer. I used to work for McDonald's, actually, and they're very hot.
Well, no, that would be foolish because he just simply refused to wear shoes. James Graham has made it his lifelong mission to walk barefoot everywhere he goes. McDonald's is no exception. Would you do that in McDonald's? I don't think so.
No, I wouldn't, but I don't mind going barefoot. I'm a bit of a zone
Not in McDonald's, though.
No.
Not in Mackie D's, where it's dirty floors.
No.
I never go barefoot anyway. No. Question 4. A Star Wars-themed Disney hotel is struggling to draw in bookings due to the high prices. But how much is a 2-night experience? Closest answer wins. Sam Dowler.
In pounds or dollars?
Whatever.
I think it's about £2,000.
I'd say 3,000.
3,000. 20,000 pounds. You're nowhere near it, Sam.
Nowhere near it, darling.
As the 2-night voyage experience comes to 20 grand, which is about £17,000. I don't think either any of us could afford that. What's going on? Where's my last question? I usually have 5 questions.
We're going to chat more.
Well, on today's show, we've been asking, should the BBC have suspended Gary Lineker? And according to our Twitter poll, 69% of you say yes, 31% of you say no. Thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also broadcaster and political commentator Sam Dowler. And thank you to you at home for your company. I'll be back tomorrow at 4 to discuss the top stories with author Christine Hamilton, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. I'll leave you with the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. We'll see rain and hail snow pushing northeastwards through the next 24 hours or so, turning breezy, but mild air is returning from the Atlantic. And we can see that in the bigger picture. We can see the oranges and yellows starting to creep in from the southwest, the blues being shunted away as we head through later Sunday into the beginning of next week. But does it last? Well, we'll see in the outlook. Through the rest of Saturday evening, we can see that band of rain across parts of Northern Ireland into northern England, pushing its way north and eastward. Some hail snow possible across the Pennines up into the mountains of Scotland. Met Office warnings in force for snow and ice, perhaps up to 10 centimetres over the Scottish mountains. Some icy stretches here, but that mild air starting to move in from the southwest of 5 to 7 by Sunday morning. But it is a dry picture to start Sunday across much of England and Wales. We see some sunny spells. Early rain will clear the northeast of Scotland to allow brighter skies for a time before then thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain move in here for the afternoon, also across Northern Ireland where the rain could be heavy at times, and then later on in the day some further rain coming into parts of Cornwall. A mild day for everyone, 12, 13, 14 degrees by Sunday afternoon in the best of any sunnier breaks. It does turn wetter and windier through the evening, though, on Sunday as bands of weather systems move in, this rain turning heavy at times, particularly across southern parts of Scotland into Northern Ireland. Too, the winds starting to pick up. Irish Sea coasts could start to see gales by Monday morning, but a very mild night. Temperatures 9, 10, 11 Celsius, so any lying snow over the hills will melt quite quickly. Then into Monday, we'll generally see an unsettled day for many. There'll be outbreaks of rain pushing eastwards across England and Wales, some very strong winds, gales around the coast. Rain across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, falling as snow over the high ground here. So some cold air nearby, outbreaks of rain, but for most it will be mild on Monday. Before then, that cold air returns to everyone by Tuesday.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, the Gary Lineker story reflects how the media and political elite are wildly out of touch with British public opinion. Wanting to stop the votes and end a criminal enterprise does not make you a bad person. From 10, we bring you the alternative match of the day, because no one at the Beeb is bothering to turn up. Full pundit reaction to the big Premier League games of the day, featuring our very own Patrick Christie's. That's a special Mark Dolan tonight from 8 till 11 on GB News, with the alternative match of the day starting at 10, back of the net.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime.